What happens if a situation arises that you were unprepared for? A situation such as a blizzard, a tornado, or being locked down due to a virus. Put yourself in any possible situation that could arise. Now ask yourself, what would you do? Where would you go? What do you need? Are you ready? Because what if tomorrow? Welcome to the What If Tomorrow podcast. I'm Philip.
And I'm Mark.
And today we've got another good episode, I think. We kind of did a little more research and a little more organization. We're working on things on the show, trying to make it better. You know, that's kind of the whole gist. We've been doing this for, we've been almost going for 5 years, man.
Just damn near 5 years.
Dang near, what, August? August will be 5 years.
August, I think, is 5 years, yes.
Yeah. I mean, we've been kind of hit or miss at times just because life happens. And this isn't an income source for us. So things take priority, obviously.
It is not. It's not like we're going to make money off this.
Right. I'd love to. Hey, why don't you guys, listeners, man, share this out. We want to do this full time.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can improve our shows, all that. They say it takes 7 years to become a professional at something.
Well, we're getting there. I mean,
my question is at 7 years, will we be professionals?
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
We've got some ideas we're throwing around, for YouTube and things to try to grow that channel. Just little things, and we're working on some ideas. I know you guys have probably heard that in the past, but life happens. Things happen. We get busy in our daily lives. I mean, right now, springtime, day job. Luckily, I'm hoping, especially for your sake, Mark, where you're at, now that you're through the end of the quarter, things have kind of calmed down for you a little bit. It doesn't sound like it is, but we're hoping
somewhat.
Mark and I used to work together up until November, and then I moved to a different department, different job.
He abandoned me.
Yep, I did. I'm thinking
I don't blame him. Get out while the getting's good.
Right. I had an opportunity and I jumped. So, tonight we're going to do, well, first things first. Let's run our ad real quick. And you guys help us out, support our affiliates, support us through them if you're inclined. So we appreciate it, at least to help pay for the hosting and all that good stuff. So do us a favor, check these guys out.
Hey, this is Mark with What If Tomorrow and What If Tomorrow on the Fringe. Be sure to check out our website, whatiftomorrowmedia.com.
Maybe.
Hey, this is Mark with What If Tomorrow and What If Tomorrow on the Fringe. Be sure to check out our website, whatiftomorrowmedia.com, and look at our cool merch. We've got t-shirts, hoodies, posters, and more. Our affiliates are Duke Cannon, EMP Shield, My Patriot Supply, and Conflicted the Game. Or check out buymeacoffee.com/whatiftomorrow and buy us a coffee. And as always, be sure to like, comment, and share on both Facebook and YouTube. It helps get our content out to others and help our channel grow. Now on with the show.
All right. Well, normally we're talking situational things. We're talking gear. We're talking steps to take, food storage, water, the typical preparedness things we typically talk about. Something I think we may have talked about at one time, maybe. I'd have to dig back through our archives and stuff like that. But today we want to talk about not just your gear, things like that, but your mindset when you come into an emergency situation, not necessarily just a preparedness situation, which is extremely important, but we want to talk about your mindset. We want to talk about some examples. I got some stories and stuff I want to share with everybody. Just examples of mental toughness, and they're pretty harrowing stories. I mean, they're, I don't know, 3 to 5 minute long or whatever. But we want to talk about what happens when your gear runs out. Is it just you? I mean, with you, your thoughts, the people that are relying on you, whether you have kids or, elderly parents. How do you stay calm? How do you stay motivated? How do you embrace that? So we kind of want to touch on that a little bit today. Share maybe some stress management techniques, quick decisions, things like that. So we kind of really want to open it up with that. But for the most part, you think about your gear. We've shared the 1 is none, 2 is 1 idea, the thought process behind that, having at least 2 of every item. That way, if one breaks, you have something to fall back on. You have something to have for parts or whatever, for equipment. But what happens when your gear breaks? Because it's going to.
It won't last forever.
No, it's going to break. It's going to, it's going to tear. How are you going to fix it? What if you don't have the stuff to fix it? What kind of knowledge do you have? Think about the pioneers, coming across, going to Oregon or California or settling out, in the Midwest or the Central Plains or the mountains and all that. What did they have on hand? I mean, they had obviously more knowledge than most people have when it comes to being self-sufficient. And I'm really liking, and I think this is one good thing, at least, that came out of the pandemic, was the push for people to become more self-sufficient. You see all sorts of homesteaders and, people trying to learn bushcrafting, learn canning. Most of it revolves around, animals. And as like I was just telling Mark right before, we're backstage just kind of chatting. We're about to have our second litter of pigs. Our first litter, they're about to go to the butcher. But it's all things that we've provided. And something else, learn, it's mushroom season right now here. They're popping, man. I mean, I got, I think 12 or 13 the other night. My wife found like 3 more tonight. So it's little good things of knowledge to have, learn how to harvest your own food, whether it be foraging, whether it be fishing. I mean, it's fishing, it's time to go fishing, and, hunting season's pretty well over, but, I'd say we had a pretty successful hunting season, and, speaking of, I'll see if I can pull this out real quick. I just got to brag on him. My son, he's really fallen in love with hunting and getting outdoors and doing things. And let me see what I got here. I'll probably have to jump through all the hoops and all that to get in here. Come on. Wow, that is awful tiny. Yeah, it's like my screen is just super tiny. Maybe I'm having technical issues too.
I lost both of my screens here earlier, and I was kind of freaking out. And then they just came back up. I was like, okay.
Yeah, give me just a second. I got to find it because, like I said, I got to brag on him. And, of course, I got to go through the 2-factor authentication and all that good stuff.
Of course you do. Aren't you glad that they're trying to keep you secure?
Right. And my phone's taking forever to load. And there we go. What's crazy, is with Streamyard, it like bounces off different servers, so you can't ever accept one.
Right.
So it's kind of a pain. Let me see here. Oh, yeah. Did I tell you we got goats too? Did I tell you that?
No, I did not know that. know
Yeah,
that.
we got some goats here.
I knew you were
A
thinking
month or
about
so
it.
ago. But yeah, I mean, oh, wrong button. I'm gonna share this real quick, and oh, hey, you're being paged in the comments,
I see
Marcus.
that. Yes. Well, I thought there was a cat in here with me, and it turned out to be one trying to get in.
Let's see.
The little one makes so much noise that I don't think I would. I don't think I would realize she wasn't in here.
Right. But yeah, this is my boy. He
Hmm.
he got out and did some rabbit hunting with us this winter after we'd snowed and all that, and he fell in love with it. And he loves hunting, loves hunting. But yeah, so I had to kind of brag on him a little bit. He's been wanting to go, and he asked his papa to bring him up a 22 or whatever, and his papa brought him a 22, and which we already have one, but it don't matter. So his papa, I mean, his grandpa, that's his only grandson, So of course, I mean, he's got that special bond with him. So, but it's pretty cool to watch it. He's growing up and enjoying hunting. But anyway, kind of back to the, think about things. I mean, it's good knowledge to have. Like I said, the pandemic in 2020, really made people open their eyes. People are hungry for the knowledge of homesteading, raising your own food, your gardens. We missed it this year, but the homesteading expo, was here a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how it went, but Joel Salatin, he's like the father of modern day homesteading, and he's got a pretty cool documentary on the Angel Network, and talking about his homestead, how he got started, and how he grew from there. I mean, this guy has testified before Congress. He actually got offered a position in the Health and Human Services cabinet for sustainable farming techniques and all that, because through sustainable farming, you can produce more food per acre than commercialized farming does.
Oh yeah.
So it's really interesting to get into, but I mean, for most of the people, not necessarily now, I think it's part of the equation. But for like the pioneers, man, imagine the grit that these people had compared to now. I mean,
Oh yeah.
we'd be laying in a puddle of our own pee and in a fetal position crying, because these people were tough, man. I mean, they had to be.
Yeah.
We are so spoiled as a society. I couldn't imagine. But what happens? The grit and the determination these people had to make it. They didn't know what they were getting into going across, especially the first ones.
Yeah.
They didn't, when they were going across the nation, they didn't have a clue as to what they were getting into. They were truly pioneers. But before we move on and start diving into techniques, I want to share one of these stories. It's about, I don't know if you remember in 2010, the Chilean mining disaster.
I do remember that.
There were 33 miners trapped for 69 days. And Luis Urzua, I can't pronounce his name, so I mean, I doubt that he ever hears it, but if he does, forgive me for messing it up anyway. But I want to share this story just because it kind of draws focus to what we're talking about. So let me get this going. See, we're still getting kind of used to this, but we're going to go for it. But the clock struck 1:40 p.m. on August 5th, 2010, when Luis Urzua felt the earth tremble beneath his feet. As shift foreman in the San Jose mine, deep in Chile's Atacama Desert, He spent 31 years listening to the mountain's whispers. This wasn't just a rumble, it was a roar. 5 minutes later, a second shudder confirmed his worst fears. The mine was collapsing. A massive slab of rock weighing more than the Empire State Building sealed 33 men, including Luis, 700 meters underground. For most, panic would have taken hold. But Luis, a 54-year-old topographer and a former football coach, didn't flinch. His mind sharpened, and he turned chaos into order. In those first suffocating hours, as dust choked the air and hope seemed buried with him, Luis gathered his men in the refuge, a cramped, sweltering shelter meant for emergencies. The ladders to the surface were missing, a grim oversight, and their food supply was pitiful, a few cans of tuna and some stale cookies, meant to last days, not weeks. Yet Luis didn't despair. He saw what needed to be done and acted. "We're a team," he told them, his voice steady. "We decide together." He introduced a one-man, one-vote system, a democracy born in darkness. Every choice, how to ration food, where to sleep, what to do, was put to a vote. 16 plus 1 was a majority, and that was law. It wasn't just practicality, it was a lifeline. It gave the men purpose, a stake in their survival. Luis's mental resilience wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, deliberate. Like the maps he drew with a pencil in the dim light of a pickup truck's headlights, he charted their underground world, tunnels, caves, the refuge, giving rescuers above a blueprint when the time came. He split their space into zones, a sleeping area, a work area, a makeshift bathroom. He kept them on a 12-hour schedule, mimicking day and night with truck lights. Fighting the disorientation of endless dark, when the food dwindled to half a spoonful of tuna every 24 hours, he ate last and least, his body shrinking but his growing resolve. "If they find us, they find us," he said, installing a calm acceptance that kept despair at bay. For 17 days they were ghosts to the world above, their fate unknown. Luis didn't let them crumble. He organized work crews, mechanics tending trucks, and others clearing rubble, keeping their hands busy and minds focused. When a drill finally broke through on August 22nd, piercing the refuge with a lifeline, euphoria erupted. They sang the national anthem, painted the probe with pride. But Luis stayed grounded. "We've got work to do," he told the health minister over a crackling call. Cutting the conversation short, he led them to reinforce a new shelter, chipping away loose rocks, preparing for the long way ahead. 69 days underground tested every fiber of his being. The heat, the hunger, the uncertainty, they gnawed at him like the rest. Yet when the Phoenix capsule finally descended on October 13th, Luis insisted on being the last. One by one, he watched his men rise to freedom, their cheers echoing down a shaft. At 9:55 p.m., he stepped out, the final miner, into a world watching in awe. He embraced President Pinera and said, "I've delivered this shift as promised." A good captain, they called him, but it was more than duty. It was a mind that refused to break, a resilience forged in dark, proving that even when the earth itself turns against you, the human spirit can hold firm. That's powerful, man. I mean, that's crazy to think about.
I remember watching it on TV. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. You know, I mean, think about it. With that many men, 33 guys, it's crazy to think about what they went through. Hey, I was playing that, Enzo. Do you like it? Just trying new things out. But thinking about that, I mean, the leadership that this man had, he had to have respect, especially great things, that, where'd it go? Okay. Yeah. Getting these men to be all on the same sheet of music when panic could easily arise, especially in total darkness. Yeah, I don't know if it's an inherent or what do they call it? Like an inherited fear,
Right?
you know, yeah, inherited trait. I mean, people are generally nervous in the dark. I don't know if that goes back to, when men were being hunted. I watched a deal the other day. They were talking about how Neanderthals actually hunted, us, today's humans. They actually used us as a food source. And there's evidence of that, but I don't know if that goes back to that or not. But obviously, he had to be respected just from the get go, because how many people would stay as calm? Now, I mean, I don't know exactly 100%. I'm sure people were starting to panic and all that, so he had to calm them down somehow, some way. They knew they didn't have a lot of food. Not sure about water. Obviously, they had to have it, or they wouldn't have went 69 days. But what got all these men through was the mindset. And that's seriously something to consider in any kind of emergency situation, is keeping your mind, understanding, not panicking. I mean, I know I've told my kids several times, when they're swimming, do not panic in the water. That's when you're going to get in trouble. It's if you start panicking. And I think that is just a general rule of thumb. Try to keep your mind. Don't panic. Try to understand the situation and move forward as best you can. He brought all these men together. He kept them busy, kept them focused on the task at hand, whether they're digging out or, rotating with sleep or whatever. I mean, I don't know how you could do that, is knowing or not being sure if help's coming.
Yeah.
How, I mean, individual, I'm sitting there trying to put myself in that position. How does one not start to panic? Because you don't know if you're being rescued. You don't know if they're going to be able to rescue you. I think you come face to face with your mortality in that aspect.
Yeah.
It's like when we were talking to No Stress Mike,
Right.
a long time ago, he's like, you have to accept the fact that you're going to die. And it may not be up to you how, but you have to accept that. And I was like, man, I couldn't wrap my head around that. Because he was talking about his Vietnam experience. And in my mind, that's kind of the same thought process. You have to accept that your number may be up soon. And I still don't know how to deal with that. That'd be the hard part about being in despair, about all that. Hey, Sylvian.
That's not something that everybody can do either.
Right.
It takes some work to get into that mindset. Because everything I've read and people I've talked to, and even mixed in some not nearly so dramatic personal experience, is as long as you can keep your wits about you, you've got a good chance of getting it through. You may not,
right,
but you might. But as soon as you
right,
panic, you're sunk. You're done.
Right. And I go back to my Marine Corps training, and I mean, it's constant stress, constant. And it's been especially in my mind here recently, because there's a young man that we go to church with who just left for boot camp. And I'm like, man, and I was trying to talk to him and try to get him prepared as possible and all that, just trying to give him pointers and all that to get through it, and, but that's what it is. It teaches you mental toughness, and in situations like that, you have to in my mind, you have to be determined that you're going to carry that resolve. You know, and I'm not saying you have to go through the military. I'm not going to say, anything like that. And I'll probably reference this later. But here, I don't know, maybe a month ago, I attended a security class for our, because I'm on the security team at church. And we were trying to get him on, and we just couldn't make it work because I invited him on. He was all about coming on, but our schedules just didn't line up the way he wanted to make it convenient or to make it to where he could get on. I'd love to have him on still, and maybe we can work through some things and all that. But one thing he said really struck a chord with me and he said, if you haven't been there mentally, you'll fail every time. Where you will go where you. And the more I've thought on that, and the more I chewed on it, because this class had such an impact on me, just with the things that he taught. I mean, there was so much in the it was an all day class. It was like an 8-hour class. It was a Saturday that we went. And it was the best 8-hour class that I think I've ever been to. Because he didn't talk just, okay, this is why we do this or that or whatever, but he went in and explained it. And it was just a beginner class, just like the level 1 class. He showed us like tactics and things like that, things to do in certain situations, showed videos and all that. Of course, like you would expect in any kind of training course like that. But he talked about the psychological side, trying to talk people down, the de-escalation and things like that. Because, when people go to church, they're typically looking for something. Granted, you have those people that just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah, there's always those.
But the majority of the time, that's not the case. But there are obviously outliers and everything. But that phrase was, you can't go where your mind hasn't been. Just struck a chord with me. Now, I don't know if Luis, I don't know, the Chilean miner, I don't know if his mind has been been there. But from what I've read, I mean, he was extremely determined to survive. He didn't give up. He brought everybody home. Didn't lose one person in the almost 2.5 months.
Yeah.
I mean, that takes determination, especially to get to 33 guys out. Now, I guess in my mind, is it easier with more people?
I don't
I'm just sitting there thinking about it. Because then you're trying to keep everybody talked down or whatever. But then again, I sit there and think, if I was by myself, would I give up faster? Bless you. Mark's having a conniption.
I didn't get my distemper shot this year. I'm serious. I'm sorry, folks. I am snotty tonight. Allergies they're trying to do me in.
But yeah, I think to myself, if it was just me, would I give up faster if I didn't have somebody there to try to get through this situation, somebody there to talk to, somebody there to push, or somebody there to have to push me to get through it? So I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to my own question. If it would be easier if it was just me, or if it would be easier with 33 people, or 5 people, or 2 people.
Well, maybe it depends on the individual.
I would agree with that.
You hear about these guys that, you know, cut his own arm off to get out from under a rock and rescue himself.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that. He's got no one to depend on, so he has to, you know, this is what I got to do to survive. And then you got the people who's thinking about other people. How do I get these people and get them home to their families? You know, so I think everybody's wired a little bit different. So I think everybody would go about it. I think that the answer to your question is that it's different for every person.
And I would agree with that. You know, like I said, I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, you know, I'm honestly, I'm not the most positive person. I go straight to the worst case scenario typically, you know, in situations.
Same. Drives my wife nuts.
But right? Is that a guy thing? I mean, I personally don't know a lot of guys that are upbeat and positive, and if they are, I think, what's wrong with you, man? You know, I don't know if that's just me or what.
My wife calls me a drama queen.
But again, is that something that's inherent to men? I mean, is it? I think men are hardwired to protect. You know, especially the ones they love. You know, they just are.
I think it's genetic, yeah.
You know, and I'm the type of person when I go into a restaurant, I try to sit back and face the door so I can see any threat. I'm looking for the exits. I mean, but I can't help but think that, and I'm not trying to be chauvinistic. I'm just trying to be real. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that would be easier for me to be by myself or have other people. You know, obviously, if I was there with my family, if my kids, I would try to be there to push them, to help them, you know, and protect them. Because that is what I feel my job is.
And that's what motivates
Provide
you.
and protect. Right. Right. So, but if it were just me, you know, and I'm sitting there thinking, would I last longer by myself? I don't know. I can honestly say I don't know. You know. Anyway, let's move on. I mean, let's man, all these tabs and stuff. Let's think about this. You know, we got through, you know, or Luis got through it. Obviously, it was insane. I mean, the stress had to be crazy, especially on him because he took on the mantle of a leader. Whether he was actually like a shift foreman or whatever, he took on the role as a leader to keep these men from going nuts, trying to keep them calm. So let's talk about, you know, different things on how to deal with the stress, because stress, and everybody has stress every day. And I really think it's how you deal with your stress. Most men that I know, they bottle it up. I mean, you know, I'm guilty. You know, bottle it up and you keep moving. You know, well, that's most men I know. But stress is going to happen. But how you respond isn't, you know, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good or bad. I mean, how you respond determines whether it's going to be good or bad. I guess some techniques I guess you could use is called tactical breathing. It's a 4-4-4-4 method. You inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. It said it's used by military and first responders. And apparently this resets your nervous system. You know, because anybody that's been in a high stress situation knows, like, man, everything's firing, tunnel vision, all that. So apparently this is supposed to reset your nervous system to try to kind of talk yourself down, things like that. And I guess there's grounding exercises, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 things you see, 4 you feel, you know, all that, and kind of anchor yourself in that chaos or whatever's going on. Sure, I mean, in the military, we dealt with stressful situations all the time, but I honestly have dealt with more stress out of the military, you know, stressful situations than in the military. You know, when I was a deputy, when I was a volunteer firefighter, you kind of deal with that stress. You find out, you know, hey, is there somebody in there in the house or things like that? It's all stress, you know. I mean, that's your first responders and things like that. I've had an incident, you know, talking about church security. I mean, the day after I went to that class, we had an incident at church. I mean, nobody got shot, nobody came in swinging, nothing like that. But all I could think was, okay, I just went through this training. So I started using those techniques to try to talk this person down, trying to resolve the situation. I mean, this may sound weird, but unfortunately the guy left, you know, because he was mad, all that. Somebody made him mad in the church. And what's crazy is I came upon the situation. I actually ran a guy I went to church with home because he didn't have a vehicle. I took him to his house so he could check on one of his kids. Got back and everything's kind of blown up, and people were not trying to de-escalate. So I stepped up. Okay, this is my job as security. Try to talk him down. You know, luckily they got him out of the building before anything serious happened. I mean, I don't think he was armed. I mean, he was homeless. I don't know if he was an addict or not, but you can tell when something's not quite right with somebody.
Yeah.
You know, he was agitated. Some things that happened while I was gone that I didn't see, so I'm not really going to speculate on exactly what happened. I've heard a couple different stories, but he was agitated. That was obvious. You know, so you try to talk him down, you know, and I don't know. It was definitely a stressful situation because I'm sitting there thinking, you know, at least he's outside. Everybody else but one person was inside. You know, now I have to try to get him away or by himself so I can try to talk him down. You know, it didn't warrant calling the cops or nothing like that. It wasn't a bad situation. I guess it could have been, but it wasn't. Another technique, I guess, is reframing the situation. You know, go from, and it's a mindset thing. And I've already told you, I go straight to the negative, man. I go straight to the worst case scenario. The sky is falling. I mean, obviously, listen to the show. But reframe it. Reframe the situation from this is unbearable to, okay, this is a challenge, you know, that I can handle one step at a time. And in my opinion, reframing the situation kind of falls to that your body can't go where your mind hasn't been.
That makes sense.
I truly believe that. You know, because you're like, this is unbearable. And I think if you haven't done that mentally before, I think the general, you know, because we've always been told you revert back to your highest level of training. You know, in any instance, you know, you probably heard that when you were going through your concealed carry course, things like that. You revert back to your training. You know, you have to bring things into muscle memory. And, you know, whether it be shooting, you have to run through scenarios, visualization, things like that. And visualization, believe it or not, works.
It absolutely
I've
does.
done it, been there. You know, you run through scenarios in your mind, and that's one thing they teach you in martial arts. Run through scenarios, especially if you're like shadow boxing, things like that. Run through scenario in your mind and how you would react to those situations. So I think you have to run through those situations. What happens if Yellowstone erupts? You know, what do I need to do? Besides, you know, your typical preparedness things. What do I do if something my wife and I have talked about multiple times? What happens if an EMP hits? She's at work, I'm at work, the kids are at school. What do we do? And we kind of war game it. Am I able to get home? Am I able to get? I mean, I don't live far from work. I live closer to work than my kids and my wife. My kids and my wife go to town. I live 4 miles from work. Shorter than that if I cut across fields. But I'm going to be more worried about getting my wife and kids home. So what is the best way for me to do that? If an EMP hits, and I said, I've ran through that scenario. What do I do? If everything's fried, my truck won't start, my wife's car won't start. She's already told me she's going to head to the school to get the kids because obviously it's closer. Chances are people aren't going to know what's going on, so bad things probably aren't going to start happening yet. So she's going to go, and I'm like, well, I could get home. My shop is all metal. Maybe it's a Faraday cage. Maybe it'll work. Maybe I can get my side-by-side. Maybe I can drive it to town, go get, find my wife and kids. Things like that. I mean, always run game plan, run those scenarios in your head, different things that are running through your mind. So definitely that's all part of it. Yeah, Enzo's like, I play out those type of war game scenarios in my head all the time. If I'm not actively speaking to him when there's going through a scenario in my head, it absolutely is maddening sometimes, Enzo. You're like, what if this happens, or what do I need to do? And I really think most, and I'm not trying to be chauvinistic, but I think most men do.
I would say that's probably correct to some extent or another.
Yeah, I do. I think it's just, that's why I think it's hardwired into men. Hey, I got to protect these people or whatever, so.
I've done it. I've done it a lot. I do it at least several days a week.
Yeah, me too. All the time. I'm constantly wargaming stuff in my head. It may sound crazy, but I am.
I don't think it's that unusual.
I don't either. And I agree, Chris. That's not what we're saying. She said she thinks that it comes back to men being protectors. I really do. I think it. I think it's a lot to do with it. Yep. So let's think about it. I'm going to throw you guys out a scenario. The power's out, and we're just kind of talking about that. The kids are scared. There's no help coming. How do you use these techniques that we just shared? The tactical breathing, the grounding exercise, and reframing the situation. How do you use those to get through? And I really haven't thought about it. I mean, we can just say it's a rhetorical question. Think about these things.
I have seen some things about that I have thought would be really helpful. I was watching a YouTube channel several years ago, so I can't even tell you who it was. They had created a list of things that need to be happen in the house for an emergency. Now, one of the kids was responsible for corralling up all the pets. One of the kids was responsible for making sure that, if the water was on, they needed to run water in the tubs, and, everybody had a job. And they had it on a list. So, the power went out or there was a tornado or what have you. They knew what to do. There was a page for the fire and all that stuff. It's the same way when we're at work or at school. We have fire drills. We have tornado drills.
Right.
Those things save lives. Since schools started doing fire drills, for instance, used to be at least 10, 20 kids a year died in a schoolhouse fire. Since they started doing fire drills, I don't think a single kid has been injured in a fire in America. Now, that number may have changed, but I want to say during one of my trainings, That's something that they discussed. So that's one thing that you can do.
Yeah. And this is like the perfect segue to the next topic. I mean, we're talking about it's about keeping your family motivated in or no, that's like the next topic, but we'll jump around. I don't care. But that's like the perfect segue. It talks about keeping your family motivated in tough times. It says you have a shared purpose. Everybody get out, or like you're talking about, your kids filling up the bathtub with water, getting them involved. Then you break tasks into achievable goals. Like, hey, go fill the bathtub up. Then you tell the other one, handle the animal, just like you were saying. Man, that's perfect, man. That is, an example
On that
today with
video,
secure water.
Every kid had their own go bag.
Yeah.
It might have just had a blanket, and a teddy bear, and a bottle of water, but
they have something.
Have something that they had to get.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing because it keeps the kids focused on their task, keeps them from panicking, which helps. In reality, it helps you keep from panicking because you know how that works. If one person starts panicking, everybody else is going to start panicking. And I truly believe that kids will panic obviously faster than adults will because they're uncomfortable. They don't know what's going on. Just as simple as that, they're going to panic. Just going back to talking about my kids, swimming. Don't panic in the water. It's the same thought process behind that. Is don't panic. Panic will get you in trouble 100% of the time.
Absolutely.
And yeah, but that's and that's technique 3. I mean, we'll go back to technique 2 real quick because that was perfect from what technique 3 is keeping your family motivated. Technique 2 is making quick decisions under uncertainty. If you hesitate, hesitation can be as dangerous as a bad call. You have to learn to make quick decisions with limited info. And I've found I react better under stress in stressful situations, just because I get out of my head. I second guess everything I do. Am I making the right decision? But in times of stress, I'm like, okay, bam, let's roll with it. Let's do this. I take that doubt out and I just roll with it. And the idea, is it's called the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. Take example, okay, this is the situation. You kind of reorient yourself. Okay, this is what I know about this situation. You make your decision. Then you follow through without second guessing. And that just seems to be what I do in stressful situations. I don't second guess myself. Maybe when things calm down, I go back, okay, how could I handle that better? Did I handle it right? Did I get the outcome I was looking for?
I personally usually freak out
but the biggest
afterwards.
Yeah. I think that makes really more sense because you're being decisive. You're trying to get through this situation, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a life or death situation. It could be a tornado warning. I mean, you guys had one going for Caney last week.
Yeah. And there'll be more coming.
Early morning. You were probably getting ready to leave for work.
I was already at work. Everybody was texting me, don't leave for work. I'm already there.
Right. So, I like these tips too. I mean, it gives you tips for this technique. It's trust your gut when time's short. It says it's your brain processing faster than you realize. That's what that is. Then you start with like a preset. If then, kind of like when you're coding. If this happens, this happens. It's if then rules with your family. Kind of going back to that, keeping your family motivated. For example, excuse me, if the smoke gets thick, we leave. You know,
Yep.
no questions asked. We're out. You know, if it's an EMP, everybody focus on one place if you're not at home.
This is where we're going to meet.
Yeah. Right. You know, or in a fire drill. Okay, everybody out, we're meeting over here.
And
you know, real simple.
That's an advantage that people in this country have over some other countries. From the time we're able to go to school, we are drilled several times a year until we are adults. This is what you do in case of this. This is what you do in case of this. This is what you do in case of this. And really, not that I'm a huge fan of public education and whatnot, even though I know some really great educators. These things serve you your whole life, and they give us a good base to expand on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely agree. Yeah, I mean, because typically that's where kids, you know, we learn that whole mindset. Okay, if this happens, everybody meets here. If this happens, you know, everybody meets here. Make sure everybody's there. We do it at work, like you said, you know.
Yep. That
needs to carry over in to your life. You know, whether it be fire drills at home, whether it be a situational issue, you know, a preparedness situation, come up with plans. You don't have to, I mean, I would recommend writing them out. And like you know, like you were talking, you know, okay, child number 1, you fill the bathtub up. Child number 2, handle the animals. You know, if you have a third child or your wife or you, let's make sure we have our food stuff. Make sure whatever, you know, just depending on the situation.
Blankets,
come up with different
water,
scenarios. Right. And that's where a good plan comes together. You know, your SOPs, you know, as we call it in the military, standard operating procedures. It's not a bad thing to have for certain scenarios or for all scenarios. A lot of it will be the same.
Yeah.
You know, as we found going down this road, you know, in preparedness, a lot of your items, a lot of your gear, a lot of everything else will be the same. Except you may have a few outliers for different scenarios. So it's really not too terribly difficult to be prepared for multiple scenarios with the same gear.
Right.
You know, I mean, for an EMP, okay, the only thing different really, you might have a Faraday cage. You wouldn't necessarily have that for an economic collapse, but you would still have that gear. Or, I don't know, zombie apocalypse or whatever. I've been kind of on a zombie kick here lately. I've been watching a lot of zombies and stuff like that. Been listening to a pretty cool book series. But,
I work with some of those guys.
Yeah, right. I know. Anyway, let's look at resilience, building your mindset, things like that. And there's another story that I do want to share, and it's really good. It's about Viktor Frankl. He's a Holocaust survivor, and he's an author of The Man's Search for Meaning. It's a really cool story. So let me pull it up here. I'm going to cue the music, Enzo. But it starts out, the train rattled to a stop, and Viktor Frankl stepped into hell. It was 1942, and the Nazis had torn him from his Vienna home, a Jewish psychiatrist with a gentle voice and a sharp mind. Auschwitz loomed ahead, a place where hope was a rumor, and survival seemed a cruel joke. They took his clothes, his manuscripts, his wedding ring. They took his wife, Tilly, and his parents too, though he wouldn't know their fate until later. All he had left was his naked self, shivering in the cold, and yet Within that stripped down shell, Frankl built something unbreakable. He'd always believed the human spirit could endure, but now he had to prove it. The days were a blur of starvation and backbreaking labor, digging trenches, hauling stones, watching men collapse beside him. Death was a constant shadow, but Frankl refused to let it claim his mind. He'd stand in the mud, boots sinking, and pictures of Tilly's face, her soft smile, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. She wasn't there, might not even be alive, but in his imagination, she was a lifeline. He'd whisper to her under his breath, promising to survive, to carry her memory beyond the barbed wire. One freezing morning, a prisoner next to him dropped dead mid-step. Frankl didn't flinch. Instead, he told himself he'd outlast his nightmare. Not just for himself, but for those who couldn't. He began to notice patterns. Some men surrendered to despair, their eyes hollowing out before their bodies did. Others held on, clinging to scraps of purpose, a child waiting somewhere, a story left untold. Frankl saw it clear as day. Suffering was inevitable, but meaning was choice. He later wrote, in Man's Search for Meaning, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. In the camps, that wasn't a theory, it was his rebellion. He'd lie awake on a splintered bunk, lice crawling all over his skin, and force his mind to work. He'd reconstruct his lost manuscript in his head, word by word, a book about finding purpose in pain. It kept him sane, gave him a reason to wake up. When the guard screamed, he'd retreat inward, imagining lecting to a room full of students, someday turning this horror into something useful. That mental toughness wasn't loud or flashy. It was a quiet, stubborn flame flickering against the wind. In 1945, the Allies came, and Frankl walked out of the camps a free man. Though freedom tasted bitter, Tilly was gone, murdered in Bergen-Belsen. His parents too, but he didn't break. He took that flame he'd nurtured and lit a path forward. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning in 9 days, pouring out his soul, and founded logotherapy, a psychology that says life's worth living when you find something worth living for. Viktor Frankl's mental toughness didn't just save him, it became a gift to the world, proof that even in the darkest pit, the human spirit can still climb towards the light. Wow.
That's powerful.
I can't imagine, being in Auschwitz. Man. Yeah.
I have no words.
What do you say? What do you say to that, I mean, it shows us, the mindset isn't abstract. It's a lifeline. And if you build on it, daily, you train your mental toughness. Again, by putting yourself in those situations, get uncomfortable. And that's tough, especially with our society, getting yourself uncomfortable. How do you do that? You can take cold showers, have tough conversations. I like to think sometimes that we try to have these tough conversations, but sometimes it's hard because Mark and I agree on just about everything. So
it is, it's like looking in a mirror at a much better looking me.
Right. Well,
you got at least younger. Yeah, my bar is pretty low.
I'll give you younger, but but get yourself uncomfortable. Go out and do some harder work than what you're used to. Again, the cold shower things. A lot of people take those cold plunges, which I'm not going to put in one of those. I mean, to me, that's a waste. But build your resilience. Small doses. You don't have to be uncomfortable all the time, but go out and get uncomfortable. Learn to be resilient. Teach your mental resilience. The tough conversations. It's like people are scared to have those anymore.
No, I don't want to offend
anybody. And to me,
anybody.
That's sad. Right. You don't want to offend anybody, or they're going to call me names or whatever. I don't care. I mean, I guess I'm I'm at that time, that time in my life where I don't care. You say what you want. It doesn't matter to me. Um, challenge. We've always said, do your own research, and if you find yourself right, if you disagree with us, show us. We're not unwilling to be challenged in our thinking. Um, that is just, to me, is being human. Make yourself better.
That is part of the human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And reflect on, another technique is reflecting on your day. What went wrong, what could have went better. How can I improve on things? If you, let's say you have a preparedness plan and you run a drill, which I recommend. I mean,
it's not a
how
bad
do you know it's
idea.
going to work? Run a drill, sit back, kind of regroup, and say, "Hey, what could have went better? How could we have handled this better? Did we plan right? Did we take the right steps?" Challenge yourself in everything. Something we talked about a little bit earlier: visualization.
Absolutely.
It works. And that's where I go back to, your body can't go where your mind hasn't been. And again, that struck such a chord in that class for me.
Yeah.
Especially in a security situation. Being that watchman or sheepdog, however you want to describe it. Are you going to react to the situation? Are you going to try to control the situation, or are you going to let the situation control you? That's where the visualization part comes in. It's been proven that, especially with high-end athletes, like Olympic level athletes, they visualize a lot. I don't remember the exact stat. You can look it up, but they've proven that in visualization, when an athlete is visualizing them winning a run or a race or whatever it is they're doing, those nerves, those signals are being sent to the muscle groups that they use, the sprinters or whatever. Those signals are being sent to the parts of the body they use. It's proven. And I find that fascinating. I thought it was fascinating for a long time about visualization. Not only that, but there's more to it, mental clarity, and you can always fall back and say, I've been in I've put myself through this similar situation.
The opposite is also true. You can negatively visualize and cause yourself to fail.
Absolutely.
I was told a very powerful story many years ago by a friend of mine who's unfortunately passed. He was a law enforcement officer, and he knew a young man who was sure if he was ever shot, he was going to die. He just was positive if he ever got shot, he was going to die. Sure enough, in the line of duty, there was an accidental discharge. He was hit in the arm by a 22, and he laid down on the ground and died of shock.
Wow.
He needed like 4 stitches.
Wow.
So
He died.
he was positive that that's what happened when you got shot. So visualization works both ways. So try to visualize positively.
Right.
If it helps, there is all sorts of true life books that you can buy anywhere they sell books and see how other people have done it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but read some of these
Right.
stories, listen to some of these stories, go on YouTube and watch some of these stories.
Right.
Some of them are absolutely awe-inspiring, and use that to get this whole noggin ticking. How would I respond to that situation? So,
I mean, always remember your mindset will trump your gear 100% of the time. If you might have all the best gear in the world, but if you don't have the mindset to use it and the understanding on how to use it, it's not doing you any good.
Yeah.
But if you have somebody that has the mindset and the cheapest gear compared to that other person,
Or no gear.
they'll win out every time. They'll win out every time. The things that could happen, it's not going to care about your stuff.
No.
But it will test you. Simple things. I mean, you get tested every day. But simple things will test you. And if you're not mentally prepared for it, you'll fail the test. So work on it. Build these tests. Visualize. Reflect. Put yourself under some stress. Things like that to get you through these situations. I don't really have a lot more, Mark. Do you? I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of...
I really don't. I do recommend, I'll say it again. I've said it many times on many shows. Buy some books, hard copy books. Read those books. You can find inspiration. And sometimes inspiration is the key to visualization, which, like Phil was talking about, I think is one of the more powerful tools that a person can have in their life. Success with money, success at work, and even failure. If all you think about is failure, you can drive yourself to failure. So,
becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Study and try to be positive. Try to find something positive.
Yep. And honestly, I've got a debt.
I'm bad at that.
Job at that.
But I've always found in my life, when shit comes down the pike, while it's falling on me, I'm usually pretty rock steady. It's the next 45 minutes after that. It's like, oh my God, I could have died. So it's okay to freak out after.
But y'all,
just don't freak out during.
Right. Not during. Once you're through it, okay, fair. But yeah, guys, don't forget Bordertown Strange Wednesday.
Bordertown Strange is coming Wednesday. And I believe they are talking about real life Final Destination stories.
Oh, wow. That'd be kind of cool.
It's going to be, if you want to, that's going to be good. That's going to be good.
Yeah.
So, and then next Monday, our postponed show about do your loved ones visit you in your dreams after they have passed. We're going to be talking about that Monday, and we are going to try to have Christy Campbell on with us. And Phil, if you can get away, it'd be great.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a good one. I have some stuff to share. So,
yep, I'll try. Luckily, like I was telling you backstage, I mean, soccer season's upon us, but as it stands right now, we don't have any games on Mondays. So that'd be good. That'd be good. Sylvian, you said that's true. Your unconscious can't make the difference between a movie and reality. So yes, positive visualization works very well.
It does.
Yep, for sure. But
All
with
right.
that being said, guys, thanks for hanging out. Again, Bordertown Strange Wednesday, On the Fringe next Monday.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. Definitely, for sure. Jess is awesome too, but Christy's an awesome guest.
Yep.
Awesome person. She's just the sweetest person. But guys, with that being said, thanks for hanging out with us. I hope you like kind of what's going on with the changes and all that. If you have any suggestions, new ideas, things like that, with ways that we can improve the show, shoot us a message on Messenger, leave us a message, email, all that. we're looking for kind of new ideas to kind of make the show better, to make it stand out more. Like I said, we have some things we're kind of working on behind the scenes, different ideas, maybe some stuff for YouTube. We'll see how it goes. But again, guys, thank you for everything, and we'll see you next episode.
Good night.